Chris Lopez here with DenverInvestmentRealEstate.com. I have Charles Roberts sitting with me. And Charles, anyone who has read more than probably half a book of a real estate investing book has come across the 1031 exchange. I know I did when I was first learning about it. It's exciting. It's confusing. So just can you kind of fill in as to brief overview what it is and how we can help people do one if that's the best thing for their portfolio?
1031 is a section of the IRS tax code, and honestly, it is this huge benefit to investors. The way it works, very simply, is that if you buy a property and you own the property for, most CPAs would say, for a year and a day, for more than a year, and you have an equity gain, you gain on the property, what you can do is you can sell that property and you can buy another property and defer the capital gains. That's what's going on here. It's a capital gains deferment play. So let's say you buy a property for $100,000 and then 3 years later you sell it and then buy another one for $150,000. What you can do is you could simply pay the taxes on that $50,000. Obviously, it's much more complicated than that, but you pay the taxes on the gain at your long-term capital gains rate, or you can do what's known as a 1031 exchange. And with a 1031 exchange, what happens is you take all the equity you have in the property that you're selling. You have to move all of the equity you have in that property at the time of sale, move it into the next property or properties, and those properties have to be of a higher value. And if you do it correctly, you can actually defer that capital gains. And here's the deal. You can defer it indefinitely. You can keep on doing it and keep on doing it. What you want to do is learn a little bit about it, but then you want to hook up with what's called a qualified intermediary. These are the propeller head guys and ladies who do nothing but figure this stuff out. And I'll tell you, they're the most creative people. They love when someone comes in and says, hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do that? Because there are enormous quantity and variance of things that you can do to do 1031s. But the fact is, in the normal world, people who work with me and people like me, most of them is pretty straightforward stuff. Bought a property a few years ago, got a bunch of capital gains, bought a single family, maybe I want to go buy a duplex with that. I don't want to pay taxes, great. You sell the single family, you buy the duplexes, you go through a QI, qualified intermediary, and you defer the capital gains. And it really works, and it's not that expensive. So anybody who's looking to do that type of thing, reach out. I'd be happy to give you a couple of resources, QIs, that will sit down and talk with you about this so that you understand it better. But what I can tell you, I've done many of these, and they're just not that complicated. The qualified intermediary does all the work, and you do it right, you can push off paying taxes ideally forever.
I just want to highlight one thing you said on there very casually about reaching out to you to talk about it. Mm-hmm. People need to probably talk to you in the QI before they even list their property, do anything, right? Because timing is critical. And this is something you need to kind of plan ahead, not just figure out halfway through of buying or selling something, right?
Well, like everything, you don't want to do it half-assed. You know, you don't want to be figuring it out in the middle. Let me give you an example. So Denver has a very strong seller's market at this point in time. One of the problems you could find is that you decide to sell a property and don't realize what the rules are. So here are the rules. If you sell a property on the date of sale, let's say you sell a property on January 4th. So you have 45 days from the date of sale of the property you're selling to identify up to 3 properties to move that equity into. Okay, so let's just say January 1st to make life easier. By February 15th, or whatever 45 days is, you actually have to have in the QI's possession the 3 properties among which you might buy 1, 2, or all 3 of them. And then you have to close on the 1, 2, or 3 properties within 180 days of that January 1st. So there are some rules here, and that's why you actually want to know what you're doing. I'll tell you, a worst case scenario is someone, goes to a little seminar on 1031s and says, great, I want to sell my property. They sell their property and then cannot find a property to replace it. I'll tell you, we see this. And it's one of the things that you want to reach out and talk to someone who understands the market to make sure that it makes sense to try to do a 1031. Because I've seen situations where people have sold a property and probably shouldn't have sold it because they couldn't find a good replacement property. Even worse, maybe they found a replacement property that they just bought to basically shelter the taxes when they could have done better by holding on to the property. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where it gets really interesting, where you want to talk to people who, didn't just read a book about this, who have done it for years and years and years, and can't just cite the rules, but can actually give you examples of how to do it right, what people have done wrong, how to think about it, the shades of gray that make all the difference between being a successful real estate investor and being unsuccessful.
Great. Well, thanks, Charles. And if you want to get in touch with us, go to denverinvestmentrealestate.com/consult. And also, if you go to the education section tab on there, we'll have some resources as well that goes into more detail on the 1031 exchange. Thank you.